Welcome to our deep dive into the world of the Anglo-Saxons. You've sent us a stack of articles and research. Looks like you're getting ready to conquer some serious history.
It's going to be an adventure.
We'll cover who these folks were, where they came from, and the impact they had on Britain. Hint, it's huge. Get ready for epic battles, surprising cultural facts, and maybe even some linguistic time travel.
I always enjoy a bit of linguistic time travel.
Okay, so Anglo-Saxon sounds like a history textbook term. Break it down for us. Who exactly were these people?
Anglo-Saxon refers to three main groups: the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. They migrated to Britain from what is now northern Germany and Denmark beginning in the 5th century. Imagine those longboat journeys across the North Sea, navigating treacherous waters to establish a new life.
I'm already picturing a dramatic historical movie scene, but what drove them to make such a perilous journey? Was it purely about conquest?
Well, it was a complex mix of factors. The Roman Empire had withdrawn from Britain around 410 AD, leaving a power vacuum, creating opportunities for ambitious newcomers. But there are also push factors at play back in continental Europe.
Okay, so what were they being pushed away from?
Overpopulation, climate change, and even flooding made Britain, with its fertile land, look increasingly attractive.
So a mix of desperation and ambition, perhaps, a bit like a historical gold rush.
Exactly. And it's even more complicated than that. There's evidence suggesting some Anglo-Saxons may have been invited to Britain by the Britons themselves.
Hold on. Invited. I thought the story was all about invasion and conquest. Why on earth would the Britons invite these warriors to their shores?
Well, after the Romans left, Britain was vulnerable to attacks from the Picts and Scots from the north.
Because they needed help.
Some Britons, perhaps desperate for protection, might have thought, hey, these fierce Anglo-Saxon warriors might be just the allies we need. Of course, they probably got more than they bargained for.
That's an understatement. So how did these three groups, Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, divide up Britain? Did they each conquer specific territories?
It wasn't quite a clean-cut division, but they did establish distinct settlements. The Angles, as you might guess, ended up in East Anglia. The Saxons primarily settled in the south and west, giving their name to regions like Essex, Sussex, and Wessex. And the Jutes mainly settled in Kent.
So it sounds like their arrival had a profound impact on Britain, shaping not just the political map, but the very fabric of the island.
Absolutely. Their impact goes far beyond just establishing settlements. The Anglo-Saxons transformed the island, leaving a legacy that continues to shape England today, from its language to its political systems and even its cultural values.
I'm especially intrigued by the linguistic legacy. I know some place names, like those ending in hetam, hint at their influence, but how deep does that connection really go?
It's deeper than you might think. While only about 26% of modern English vocabulary is directly derived from Old English, the language spoken by the Anglo-Saxons, those words are the ones we use most frequently. It's the bedrock of our everyday speech.
That's mind-blowing. So even though Old English sounds very different from modern English, we're still speaking a language that has its roots in that era. It's like a linguistic time capsule.
Precisely. And it's not just vocabulary. The structure of English grammar, the way sentences are formed, even the way we think about language itself owes a lot to Old English.
It makes you wonder if the Anglo-Saxons ever imagined that their language would evolve into the global language it is today. What about their political systems? You mentioned that they also left a legacy in that area.
Indeed. The Anglo-Saxons introduced new systems of governance to Britain, including the concept of kings and councils working together.
A system of checks and balances.
Some historians argued that these systems laid the groundwork for later developments in English governance, including the monarchy and even to some extent the concept of English democracy.
Wait, are you saying that these warrior societies had democratic tendencies? That seems counterintuitive.
It's a complex and debated topic. There's a theory called the Saxon myth, which suggests that certain elements of modern English democracy, like local governance and legal traditions, can be traced back to Anglo-Saxon practices. However, other historians caution against oversimplifying the link, arguing that it's a much more nuanced picture.
So another historical puzzle to unravel. Now, when we think of the Anglo-Saxons, the image of fierce warriors often comes to mind, but their influence goes far beyond the battlefield, right?
Absolutely. Anglo-Saxon society was more than just warriors. It was also built on the foundations of the churchman and the working man. This triad shaped their social structures, their values, and their worldview.
This idea of a more multifaceted society leads to a question that's been on my mind. We often hear about the Anglo-Saxon invasion of Britain, but some historians suggest a more complex picture, right? Was it really a straightforward conquest, or was there more to the story?
You've hit on a key debate in Anglo-Saxon studies. The traditional invasion narrative, with its image of conquering warriors sweeping across the land, has been challenged in recent years. Archaeological findings and a closer look at historical records reveal a more intricate picture, one of coexistence, cultural exchange, and a gradual process of integration and change.
So it's not as simple as us versus them. There were interactions, collaborations, and perhaps even moments of peaceful coexistence woven into this historical tapestry.
That's a great way to put it, and it reminds us that history is rarely a straightforward story of heroes and villains. It's a complex web of human interactions, and understanding those nuances is key to getting a more complete picture of the past.
Well, with that in mind, I'm eager to delve deeper into those nuances. Let's move beyond the battlefield and explore the daily lives of the Anglo-Saxons. What was it like to be an ordinary person in Anglo-Saxon Britain?
Daily life for the Anglo-Saxons was, of course, heavily influenced by their social structure. At the top were the kings, followed by the thanes.
Powerful nobles.
Powerful warriors and nobles who held land and influence. But the vast majority of people were ceorls, farmers, and workers, who formed the backbone of the Anglo-Saxon economy.
So a hierarchical society, much like many others throughout history. But beyond just working the land, did they have any other skills or crafts that they excelled in?
Absolutely. They were renowned for their metalworking skills, producing intricate jewelry, weapons, and even helmets that served as both practical tools and status symbols.
Status symbols, tell me more. Were they as elaborate as those dazzling crowns we see in historical dramas?
Perhaps not crowns, but their metalwork was incredibly intricate and often reflected the wearer's status and wealth. For example, the Fuller brooch, a masterpiece of Anglo-Saxon craftsmanship, is a small, round brooch decorated with complex interlacing patterns of animals and plants. It's believed to represent the five senses and perhaps even deeper spiritual concepts.
Wow, that's fascinating. So small but incredibly detailed.
And because metalwork was so highly valued, the quality and decoration of objects often reflected social standing.
So, a bit like designer handbags today. It's fascinating to think that these everyday objects held such significance and told stories about the people who owned them.
Exactly. These objects weren't just functional, they were expressions of identity, belief, and social hierarchy.
It sounds like the Anglo-Saxons had a keen eye for detail and a love for beautiful objects. And speaking of beautiful objects, I can't resist asking about the famous Sutton Hoo ship burial. What can you tell us about that remarkable discovery?
Get ready to be transported. Imagine a 90-foot-long ship, buried intact, filled with an array of treasures. Gold coins, weapons, armor, and a magnificent helmet adorned with intricate designs. It's a truly jaw-dropping example of Anglo-Saxon craftsmanship and a glimpse into their beliefs about the afterlife.
Wow, that's quite a send-off. A ship filled with treasures buried beneath the earth. It paints such a vivid picture of their culture and their reverence for the deceased.
It truly does. The Sutton Hoo discovery provided invaluable insights into the lives, beliefs, and artistry of the Anglo-Saxons, revealing a level of sophistication and cultural richness that continues to amaze historians today.
So, from exquisite brooches to a ship laden with treasures, it seems like artistry was interwoven into the fabric of their lives. But we can't forget about their storytelling tradition, can we? I'm thinking of the epic poem Beowulf, which I remember from my school days. How does that fit into the picture of Anglo-Saxon culture?
Beowulf is a window into the heart of Anglo-Saxon values and beliefs. Set in Scandinavia, it tells the story of a heroic warrior battling monsters and ultimately sacrificing himself for his people. It's a tale of courage, loyalty, and the struggle against fate, themes that resonated deeply with the Anglo-Saxons.
It's interesting that the poem is set in Scandinavia, not Britain. Does that point to a broader cultural connection beyond the shores of England?
Absolutely. To fully understand the Anglo-Saxons, we need to consider their place within a wider network of Germanic cultures that spanned Northern Europe. Their language, mythology, artistic motifs, all of these elements have roots that stretch back centuries before their arrival in Britain.
So it's not just about a single island, but a web of cultural exchange and interconnectedness that stretched across continents.
Precisely. And exploring those connections helps us to paint a richer and more nuanced picture of the Anglo-Saxon world. It's a world that, in many ways, laid the foundation for the England we know today.
Speaking of foundations, I'd love to hear more about the kings who ruled during this pivotal period. Were there any standout figures, those who really shaped the course of Anglo-Saxon history?
Oh, absolutely. When we talk about Anglo-Saxon kings, there are a few names that truly stand out. First, we have to mention King Alfred the Great.
The Great. That title alone suggests a pretty remarkable figure. What sets him apart from other Anglo-Saxon rulers?
Alfred's reign was defined by resilience, strategic brilliance, and a dedication to knowledge that earned him that great title. He faced relentless pressure from Viking raids and invasions, but he didn't simply fight back with brute force. Alfred was a master strategist who understood the importance of adapting to his enemy's tactics.
So he was more than just a warrior king. What kind of strategies did he employ?
He recognized the need to strengthen his defenses on both land and sea. He reformed the English military, built fortified towns known as burhs, and even adopted some of the Vikings' shipbuilding techniques to create a more formidable navy.
It sounds like he turned the Viking strengths against them. That's clever. But you mentioned something about it, dedication to knowledge. How did that play into his reign?
Alfred firmly believed that a strong kingdom needed a well-educated populace. He promoted literacy and learning, even translating important works from Latin into Old English to make them accessible to a wider audience. He's considered a key figure in preserving and promoting Anglo-Saxon culture during a time of great upheaval. A warrior scholar, that's an impressive combination. It sounds like he left a lasting impact on England beyond just military victories.
He certainly did. Alfred's reign is seen as a turning point in Anglo-Saxon history, a period of consolidation and cultural renewal that paved the way for a unified England.
Speaking of a unified England, I recall you mentioning that King Athelstan was considered the first true king of England. What made his reign so significant?
Well, before Athelstan, England was more of a patchwork of smaller kingdoms, often vying for power. Athelstan, Alfred's grandson, inherited that legacy and proved to be both a brilliant military leader and a shrewd politician. He conquered the Viking kingdom of York, uniting all of England under his rule for the first time.
So he brought an end to the fractured kingdoms and forged a single, unified nation. That's a monumental achievement. What else can you tell us about his reign? Athelstan didn't just conquer. He consolidated his power. He established a strong central government, standardized laws and coinage, and even cultivated alliances with other European rulers. His reign marks a pivotal moment in the transition from a collection of smaller kingdoms to a more cohesive and powerful England.
It's amazing to think how much these two kings, Alfred and Athelstan, shaped the course of English history. Their legacy is still felt today.
It's remarkable how much their decisions and actions continue to resonate centuries later. And it's important to remember that their reigns weren't just about battles and conquests. They also laid the groundwork for a flourishing culture that valued artistry, storytelling, and even the pursuit of knowledge, as we saw with Alfred.
It's a powerful reminder that history is made up of individuals who, through their actions, can alter the trajectory of entire nations. We've talked about the artistry of the Anglo-Saxons, from their intricate metalwork to the grandeur of the Sutton Hoo ship burial. It seems like aesthetics and craftsmanship played a significant role in their culture. Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Absolutely. The Anglo-Saxons had a deep appreciation for beauty and ornamentation. It wasn't just about decoration. These objects held symbolic meaning and reflected social status, beliefs, and even spiritual ideas.
Earlier, you mentioned the Fuller brooch as an example of their intricate metalwork. Are there any other notable artifacts that showcase their artistic talents?
There are so many. One fascinating example is the Frank's casket, a small box made of whalebone and covered with intricate carvings. The scenes depicted on the casket draw from a mix of sources: biblical stories, pagan myths, Roman legends, showing a blend of cultural influences that's characteristic of the Anglo-Saxon period.
It sounds like a miniature museum, and the fact that they chose to decorate a seemingly mundane object like a box speaks to their appreciation for beauty in everyday life.
Precisely. The artistry wasn't confined to grand displays of wealth or power. Even everyday objects were imbued with a sense of craftsmanship and beauty. And it wasn't just limited to the elite. While the most elaborate and valuable items were typically found in high-status burials, ordinary people also adorned themselves with jewelry, decorated their clothing, and incorporated artistic elements into their homes.
It seems like artistry wasn't just a luxury. It was woven into the very fabric of Anglo-Saxon society. We've touched on this already, but it's fascinating to think that the Anglo-Saxon story isn't confined to the British Isles. You mentioned Beowulf being set in Scandinavia and the Frank's casket incorporating diverse cultural influences. What else can you tell us about their connection to the wider world?
To fully grasp the Anglo-Saxon world, we had to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Their language, mythology, and artistic style shared deep roots with other Germanic cultures across Northern Europe. It's a reminder that even in those times, societies were interconnected, exchanging ideas, stories, and artistic motifs.
It's easy to think of the past as isolated pockets of civilization, but it seems like cultural exchange and interaction were just as vibrant then as they are today. It makes me wonder if there are any surprising discoveries that have challenged our understanding of the Anglo-Saxon timeline or their interactions with other cultures.
You're right. One area of ongoing research is the possibility that Germanic-speaking people, perhaps soldiers recruited by the Romans, were present in Britain even earlier than previously thought, possibly as early as the 4th century.
Wow, even earlier.
This theory, based on archaeological finds and linguistic analysis, is reshaping our understanding of the Anglo-Saxon migration and its impact on Roman Britain.
That's incredible. It's like fitting a new piece into a historical puzzle. It shows that even though we've been studying the Anglo-Saxons for centuries, there's still so much more to uncover.
Absolutely. New discoveries are constantly being made, and our understanding of the past is constantly evolving. And that's what makes history so captivating. It's an ongoing conversation, a journey of exploration that never truly ends.
Speaking of journeys, we've been focusing on the Anglo-Saxons' arrival and their impact on Britain. But what about their relationship with the natural world? Did they view nature as simply a resource to be exploited, or was their perspective more nuanced?
That's a great question. For the Anglo-Saxons, nature wasn't just a backdrop to their lives. It was an integral part of their worldview, their mythology, and their social structures. They were keen observers of the natural world, attuned to its rhythms and cycles, and their beliefs and practices reflected that deep connection.
So they weren't just focused on conquering and building, they saw themselves as part of a larger natural order.
Exactly. Their lives were closely intertwined with the land. They relied on nature for sustenance, for materials to build their homes and craft tools, and even for inspiration in their art and storytelling.
And their relationship with nature probably extended beyond the practical, right? I'm thinking about those ship burials again. Burying a ship filled with treasures seems like a symbolic act that goes beyond just practical considerations.
You're right on the mark. The ship, a vessel of travel and exploration, likely held deep symbolic meaning for them. Burying a ship with the deceased suggests a belief in a journey to the afterlife, a voyage across a vast and mysterious sea to another realm.
It's a powerful image that speaks to their understanding of life, death, and the mysteries that lie beyond our mortal world. And it connects their practical skills as shipbuilders with their spiritual beliefs. It seems like nature was woven into every aspect of their lives, from their livelihoods to their beliefs about the afterlife.
Absolutely. And studying their relationship with nature offers a fascinating lens through which to examine our own connection with the environment. How have our views of nature evolved over time? How have our actions impacted the natural world? And what can we learn from the past as we face the environmental challenges of the present and the future?
Those are big questions. But they're questions worth pondering, especially as we learn more about how past societies interacted with their environment. It seems like the more we delve into the Anglo-Saxon world, the more we realize how much they have to teach us, not just about history, but about ourselves.
Indeed. Their story challenges us to think differently about the past, to move beyond simplistic narratives of invasion and conquest, and to appreciate the complexity of human interaction and cultural exchange.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the origins of the Anglo-Saxons to their lasting legacy on English language, culture, and politics. But before we wrap up, I'm curious to hear your personal take on this period of history. What's the one thing that stood out to you the most as we explored this topic?
It's hard to choose just one. There were so many fascinating threads we've pulled on today.
So many.
But I think what really struck me was their deep connection to the natural world, how they viewed it as not just a source to exploit, but as an integral part of their worldview.
Yeah. Their mythology, their social structures, even their burial practices reflected that connection.
Exactly. It's a reminder that for much of human history, people lived in a much closer relationship with nature than many of us do today.
Makes you think, doesn't it, about how our own relationship with nature has evolved over time and the impact that's had.
Definitely. And it makes you wonder, what can we learn from their perspective as we face the environmental challenges of today?
That's a question worth pondering. So, listener, we leave you with a final thought. If you could step back in time to Anglo-Saxon Britain, what aspects of their world would resonate with you? What would surprise you? What would challenge your preconceived notions? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Anglo-Saxon world. Until next time, keep exploring.